Volkswagen saw India through German lenses.
When I was doing a little bit of research about the group, I learned that the size of the group itself is as big as the Indian automotive industry.
Yeah. They are planning, let's say, I think you also wrote about it, a next generation of ICE vehicles.
I'm looking forward to MQB A037. Probably that will give us the future cars, the new gen.
That's right.
The new gen products, and probably a wider portfolio from the group.
What I hear is Volkswagen is desperately fighting for the sub 4 meter. They want it. Hello, we are back with our weekly podcast, Deep Drive, powered by Kotak Mahindra Prime. I'm Hormazd Sorabjee.
I'm Ketan Thakkar.
Well, when Ketan and I are together, we are usually spilling a lot of beans. Ketan, this time a company that we both tracked quite a bit, and I think we got a lot of info on it. Yes, we're going to be talking about Volkswagen and Skoda. Both these brands, well-known brands, they are well-established over here, but facing a bit of a crossroads. Their future, there's a lot happening. Clearly, India is a very important market for both these brands. They have to stick it out, but how are they going to do that? What they've done in the past, I think, Ketan, is that what we should be talking about?
Absolutely. Storied brands. I think Skoda has been around for more than 2 decades now. You've seen their evolution over the years. And I remember as a rookie reporter way back in 2007, 2008, the entry of Volkswagen brand was much talked about, and as to how they're going to actually transform the Indian automotive industry. I'm very keen to know from you about their storied past and some of the hits and misses. I mean, of late, we've seen what's happening with the brands, but I'd like to go right back in time when both these brands entered the market.
Well, Skoda's entry was, not what you would expect in the way Volkswagen entered. It came with the Octavia. More than a CKD, it was an SKD assembled in a Siemens plant,
Wow.
Before they moved to Aurangabad, in their own plant in Aurangabad. I think Octavia, it just blew everyone away. It blew us away, and it was so well priced. Petrol base price, I think, was around 10.5 lakhs at that time, on par or just a little bit more expensive than the Opel Astra, which was its competitor. Absolutely fantastic product. I think we first got the taste of what a well-engineered car was. And what was interesting is at that time, Skoda was seen as, a kind of not even a serious brand in Europe. It had just been taken over by Volkswagen in the 90s, and there were a lot of Skoda jokes. It was seen as a down market brand in Europe, if I might say so. But in India, it was seen as a premium brand because no one knew what Skoda was. And I think that kind of mismatch has always been a slight issue with Volkswagen and Skoda, because I think Skoda had that kind of premium edge, which it kind of tried to maintain.
Early mover advantage.
And then Volkswagen came and muscled in on that, and they kind of internally decided that Volkswagen would kind of take the higher position in that. But Volkswagen also, you remember, big bang launch, 2009. I mean, they came with guns blazing. And they kind of, I think that marketing budget must have been crazy. Do you remember that talking car they had in...
talking newspaper.
Newspaper, yeah. And I think for the Vento, they kind of hung a car across the building. They did some crazy stuff, things which we do remember. So really, they came with a bang. And I think initially, Volkswagen was flying. I think people loved the design. They loved the European feel of it. And I think everyone took to it. And I think at its peak, was it 2011, 12? I think about 76,000 cars, even more than Honda.
Wow.
Yeah.
In a matter of just 4 years.
That's right.
3-4 years, yeah.
Exactly. But then I think things started to be going pretty much pear-shaped. I think at that time, costs began to bite. Because the problem was, and this is a continuing problem, Volkswagen saw India through German lenses. They always missed those nuances, those subtleties, what was important. And, cost was an issue. And also, to be honest, the engines were a problem.
Right.
The 1.2 petrol wasn't very competitive compared to, let's say, a good Japanese 1.2. The diesel, they didn't have a 1.5. They didn't take advantage of the sub 4 meter rule and give a 1.5 till much later. They carried on with that 1.2 3-cylinder engine. And that also had a fundamental problem, because it had counter-rotating shafts, 3-cylinder to balance it out. The sump was very low.
Right.
So a lot of sump damage. And they didn't have a sump guard. They didn't even have a sump guard for that. They didn't engineer that. So I think they hadn't done their homework completely well.
Absolutely, because during 2001 to 2000, 14. I mean, India was predominantly a small car market. Sub 4 meter actually ruled the roost. Almost 80-85% of market was in the compact car space. And the segments that both Skoda and Volkswagen chose at the top end, I mean, while it helped them build their premium imagery, but it did not allow them to have a much larger market share, over the years. So do you think the right products to enter the Indian market, or probably after the first entry, the subsequent products actually were not really designed or suitable for Indian market? I mean, what was your?
I think, to be honest, I think the Vento was a great product. I mean, it was smart. It was a stretch version of the Polo, not the same wheelbase. I think it had 80 plus mm more. 1.5 TDI, which was absolutely fantastic. A great engine, in that sense. But I think, maybe short on features, didn't have that wow factor. At that time, Hyundai with the Verna, Honda again with successive generations of the City were kind of, fighting back. And I think then what happened is, unfortunately, which is happening with Volkswagen, there was no proper life cycle planning.
Right.
I mean, it took 10 years with the same Vento, just constant facelifts. By then, I think Honda had moved on to 2 generations of the City ahead. So there was a little stagnation in product planning at that point. And though the cars were great, and I think, one thing you have to hand it is that their engineering is actually fantastic, even to this day. I mean, no other mass brand can touch them in certain aspects. Safety also being very important, their engines being important, very good, their ride quality, their handling. And, there were certain details which, I think just things felt a lot more solid in Volkswagen and Skodas than other cars.
Did it create confusion in the consumer's mind? And Indian consumer in the late 2000s was, internet was booming and people were reading a lot more about cars. Everyone knew where did Skoda come from. It was part of Volkswagen Group. The positioning of both the brands, something that you already alluded to a little bit. Did that create confusion? Was it because of the synergies that they want to create between both of them? Positioning of Volkswagen above Skoda, whereas Skoda was known as a more premium brand.
Yeah.
I mean, in a bit to kind of get more of the Indian market, was the positioning compromised a bit?
See, I think both these brands were new. So obviously, it's not like in Europe, but each had a deep legacy and a deep history. So people who bought a Skoda would always buy a Skoda. Their fathers, their grandfathers, whoever were into the Skoda brand. And similarly with Volkswagen India, the evolving market was quite new. But I think at the end of the day, it really worked down to small brand nuances. And, I think that's what it was. And I think Skoda typically had a good edge. They had the Fabia.
Right.
Then they stopped making the Fabia because
they were losing money big time.
Too costly. And I think that's what has been one of the issues with Volkswagen is cost. I think that's what, historically, from the minute they launched the Polo, it's never ever made money.
Wow.
I mean, right till the end, the Polo, they must have been losing about 800, 900, this is what I hear, euros per car.
That's
800 to 900 euros per car. There are reasons for that. I mean, firstly, a lot of it should have been localized, but Volkswagen being Volkswagen wanted a certain standard, they didn't want to localize it. So, for example, some of the 50 to 60% of the steel was imported. Now, that is a crazy cost. I think their supplier was POSCO. They would get it from Korea, and just do the zinc galvanizing over here. But, the steel would be imported. Then something like the dashboard. Now, they localized the dashboard, but they found that the material for the local supplier wasn't scratch resistant enough, and they have this thing on VOC or volatile organic compounds, which, they have a certain standard for. And an Indian supplier couldn't meet that, so they imported the material for the dashboard. These sort of things were, which really the Indian consumer didn't care about. But I think finally with India 2.0, they learned their lesson. They learned a lot. And, I think, frankly, India 2.0 was pretty successful. I think I would say that it was a real 2.0 for both the brands, a kind of a new chapter. And both these cars, very, very good. Again, have limitations, but I think they're fundamentally good cars. But again, competition has moved on. There's a lot more choice, a lot more variants within that here. Volkswagen doesn't have a diesel, for example, which they should have.
Right.
After Dieselgate, they've just been scared about diesel, which is crazy because in India is such a strong diesel market. And across the entire brand All the brands don't have diesel. So these are, again, applying, let's say, European ideals to India, which don't always work.
In fact, I would like to ask you about the impact of Dieselgate scandal on the Indian market. Even as volumes were, kind of had hit a plateau, the Dieselgate scandal globally kind of made them relook at their global plans. And did that in a way impact India, Volkswagen brand, Skoda brand, and probably after that is when you saw the realignment and Skoda getting more responsibility, and hence the India 2.0 project that came in and probably allowed them to relook at India from a different lens perspective.
Well, clearly Volkswagen has never been the same after Dieselgate. It's just, frankly, in a way, not recovered from it. And the legacy of Dieselgate is something which everyone is, you can see it in a lot of the way Volkswagen operates in India, for example. So diesel is gone. Now it's interesting that why there is no diesel across the group. Now, let's say the 2-liter TDI, where it should have gone to BS 6, but they didn't do it. And the fundamental reason for that is cost. Now, from what I hear, to recalibrate for BS 6, to develop for BS 6 just for the Indian market, the base 2-liter TDI, I think the calibration or let's say the engineering cost, which Volkswagen was charging the India operations, was around 12 million euros.
Insane.
Yeah, that's what I hear. Maybe a little bit more or less, but that's a crazy amount. Now, you would ask, why that much? Because Volkswagen, after Dieselgate, has a policy that even though the standard might be the same, and then can use the same calibrations from Europe here and say, no, they will recalibrate in every market where there's fresh homologation required. So that throws the cost out of whack. So, each variant of the engine, so let's say, a Tiguan got a 2-liter TDI, which was the main one, then an Audi for that, an incremental cost of, let's say, 1 or 2 million euros to kind of adapt that same base engine to the different models would be much cheaper. But still, the volume wasn't enough to kind of justify that cost. So diesel went out of the picture. So I think these are the things that happened. Then I think also looking at certain partnerships, whether they're trying it with Mahindra, whoever, there's just their compliance is crazy. Their legal processes are crazy. They want to make sure that they dot every I and cross every T. So it's really become, it's kind of slowed down a lot of, the decision-making process. It's caused a lot of complexity in the way they do business. And it's not been easy. And clearly we are seeing that effect in India as well.
But these factors of higher price, higher cost has been something that I've been reading, talking and reporting about over the last decade. Do you think those factors have been addressed, given the fact that it's a humongous group? When I was doing a little bit of research about the group, I learned that the size of the group itself is as big as the Indian automotive industry.
Yeah.
And 10 different brands and so many different vehicle architectures to choose from. They're pretty strong in Latin America. They're the kings in Europe. They're doing very well in North America, barring the Dieselgate scandal that hurt them. But, do you think that in the last decade and a half, getting the right vehicle architecture for India that meets the Indian cost and also the evolving needs of the Indian buyers? Do you think that for them getting the right sort of products and platform has been the biggest challenge?
I think it has, because I think basically they've had to work off a European platform. And the MQB A0. Well, look, there was firstly a big delay. They lost about 2 years in deciding whether to stick with the older Polo and Vento platform, which was the PQ25, or move to the MQB A0. So it was PQ25, MQB, big debate going on internally, and they lost a lot of time in that. Advantage of PQ25 was it was an old platform. It would have met all the safety, crash safety norms, but the electrical architecture was too outdated. In fact, If you remember, they launched the Polo, a facelift version in 2015 with just a touchscreen which looked like it was an aftermarket unit. That's because the electrical architecture couldn't support anything more. The dials were still analog, all that. So now to replace an ENE or electronic and electrical architecture in a car is like changing the platform. It's just a huge cost to retrofit it.
Right.
So I think but then MQB was costly as well, but then they went for it. And the platform they chose was the MQB A027, which was the newer platform. It was the second-gen MQB A0 platform. But as it turned out, it's a bit narrow. And there's a good reason for that, and I don't know why Volkswagen don't talk about it more. It's one of the weaknesses in both the Kushaq and the Taigun is that the rear seat is a bit narrow. Enough legroom, but it just feels narrow and small at the back. Even it's optically small. That's because for crash, Volkswagen has deliberately kept space between the seat and the door for crash. Now, the side impact test, it meets with flying colors as a result of that. But what's happened is that the seat is much narrow.
Compromises the space?
It compromises the space. So clearly it is a bit small. You can't really do a 7-seater version out of this, which they should have. It's an incremental development cost. I don't know whether they would have. So I think that's been one of the challenges. Also the engines, just 2 engines, a 1 liter and both fantastic engines, I have to say. The 1 liter TSI mated to the 6-speed Aisin. They've done an outstanding job. 1.5 to the DSG, again, good. But, the thing is, do Indian customers really appreciate this as much as, what other brands like Kia, fundamentally Hyundai, which has really stolen this segment, they give. So they've lost out in this arms race for onboard tech,
right?
Which the others give a lot more. And then there's also Volkswagen's crazy cost structure, which doesn't allow you to do some basic things because Volkswagen, it's their platform, they want to engineer it. So I'll give you one example. From what I hear, puddle lamps were thought of, but some sources, some friends who I know who are working on this say that they were wanting to charge Indian operation 5 million euros just to put in puddle lamps.
Insane.
Yeah. Remote engine start, which is a feature which have been good, and a lot of rivals offer it. I heard that development cost was about 7 to 8 million euros, maybe more. So with these kind of development costs, it makes it completely unviable. So I think that's where really the Indian operations suffer in that sense. And then I think maybe clever ways to give it as a factory-fitted accessory, because going the accessory route is much easier, less approvals. You can use a local vendor and stuff like that. Otherwise, Volkswagen would not say that this vendor is not authorized. We're not giving the engine codes. Too bad. You can't really use it. So they want to control everything. Now, Skoda had got the MQB A0, but a lot of the parts, were still Volkswagen proprietary parts. So they couldn't develop it. Now, Skoda, a lot more flexible, a lot more easy to getting, local adaptations, reducing costs in that way. In fact, even their margins are much higher, let's say about 9% compared to Volkswagen, which is about 3.54%. I mean, that's really the story of Volkswagen is very high cost, that despite being such a premium brand and charging a lot more, the margins are so low. That just shows how high their costs are. So this whole cost issue has been a major problem for Volkswagen and makes it very difficult for them to be viable. Though I have to say with India 2.0, they've really, kind of optimized as much as they could, gone to local suppliers as much as, I don't think, literally, I can imagine engineers not wanting to do this, but this thing was just rammed through. But there are still issues where, the cost becomes a big hurdle for, the brand. And again, coming back, any regulation change, the cost of meeting those regulation change becomes so prohibitive that for the volumes we have here, it doesn't make sense to launch that car. That's why you have this stop-start of a lot of the CKD models.
I mean, one factor, if I could just again take you back before India 2.0, it could have been a different story if Volkswagen Group would have got into this global partnership or equity deal with Suzuki Motor. I mean, I remember as a rookie reporter reading Autocar India early at that point in time, Volkswagen getting an A-star version of Maruti Suzuki.
And Skoda the Wagoner.
Skoda the Wagoner. Could it have been a different story? And then after, help me understand their endeavors of getting into alliances in India. First, it was Maruti Suzuki or rather Suzuki Motor Corporation. Then it was Tata Motors. Gunter Butschek, the German MD of Tata Motors, did get into advanced discussion with Volkswagen Group at that point in time and Bernhard Meyer of Skoda at that point in time. And then now the conversation with Mahindra and Mahindra. Clearly, this point is connected to the cost factor as to how they've tried to address this cost factor by having local partners. Just help me reflect on those partnerships and as to what were the attempts and what did it really do to the brand? Did it probably delay their own individual endeavors, or were those discussions actually fruitful in what they're going to execute now in the future?
You're right. It did delay their own endeavors because, I'm always hopeful something will work out. I think with Volkswagen and Suzuki, it was a global play. They had equity in Suzuki, which then I think Suzuki took back 20%, I think. Yeah. And clearly the whole idea was the Indian market. That's the reason why Volkswagen wanted Suzuki. That was a way to kind of crack this Indian market. Total clash of cultures. It just didn't work. I think there was certain arrogance in Volkswagen at that time, which was Suzuki didn't like. He's a feisty, fiery guy. And I think he was the last man laughing and still going strong, while the others at that time, whoever there was, so there was Peak, there was Winterkorn, Christian Klingler, all of the big heavyweights all gone after Dieselgate. I think with Tata, it would have been a good working together. But again, I think over there, Volkswagen engineers, I think what I think they misled Bernard Meyer, because Bernard Meyer was not really an engineer. He would take what their engineer said. Engineers turned around, told them, listen, it's costing as much of us if we were to take Tata's platform. And Tata's platform was actually validated by EDAG for Volkswagen. It was the Altroz platform.
We had progress to that level.
Their alpha architecture. And clearly, we can only imagine what might have been. They would have been, today you could have had a Tata version of a Taigun and a Kushaq with maybe a diesel engine from Tata. It would have been...
Or a Nexon or a VW or Skoda version of a Nexon.
Exactly, yeah, something like that, yeah. But I just think culturally, it's very, very difficult for Volkswagen also to have partnerships. Talking to Mahindra, that's the one. Right now, they've got a good arrangement going as a, supplier. But again, when an OEM is a supplier and OEM to OEM supplier, there are a lot of kind of, let's say, issues over there, antitrust issues, a whole lot of issues over there, which gets into legal tangles and paperwork tangles. And we know that that's also been a long, drawn-out process. When the batteries will come and when the motors will come from Volkswagen is, that's not been as, I think that's not been as quickly as one would have liked. But clearly, I think there's a good discussion going on at the top. There's, good synergy. I think a lot of people don't know, but I think maybe 2 months back, Anisha met Oliver Bloom.
Oh, wow. Already at top level.
At top level, I think they are looking at synergy. The initial part was, would Mahindra be interested in the MEB 21 architecture? I think clearly that's not happening. From what I understand, it was a very scaled down bit of, I think it didn't even have a touch screen from what I understand from, what they saw. So things have developed from that on. And that is another problem of Volkswagen. They don't know how to reduce engineering costs. They just don't know how to reduce costs. For them, the way to reduce costs is decontent the car, which the customer doesn't like. There's no value engineering to that extent which needs to be done. But coming back to their partnerships and alliances, I think right now the conversation on is that would Volkswagen be interested in Mahindra's InGlow platform for their top hats?
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, so it's gone the other way. So I think clearly Volkswagen is very...
And Mahindra has always been open to, partnering people.
Yeah, I think what's clear is they will not do a joint venture because joint ventures don't work really. And, I think they want to be very careful of it, as it Mahindra's, doesn't have a great reputation for joint ventures, right or wrong. That's a separate conversation altogether. But I think they're very clear that it would be a technical collaboration or whatever. But over here, they are... I think might even be looking at capacity in the Chakan plant. In fact, what I've heard of late is that there is some discussions going on to that extent. What I hear is some maybe information has been, shared on the plant. So Mahindra seriously looking at their Chakan plant as a
makes sense. They're close door neighbors actually.
Yeah, that's right. So it does, but will it work? Won't it work? We don't know. Still early days.
Better to partner without equity.
This is all speculation. Yep. Yeah, that's right. But I think there's another angle on partnership which had been explored earlier. And that's a more logical one. And that's with the SAIC.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think...
Even before GSW would come into picture.
In fact, I want to play an interview which I had with Bernard Meyer. I think this was 4 years back. I think the Auto Expo just before COVID 2020. Yeah. Where I asked him a direct question, would SAIC be a partnership? And though he didn't say it directly, looking at his face and his smile, he said it's something they could explore. Let's quickly hear that.
Would you be open to other partnerships? I mean, it didn't work out with Tata Motors, but you've got SAIC or SAIC as a partner in China. They are here as well with MG. It's quite logical that you could be chatting with them for potential cooperation, because that's really the nature of the game today. You're smiling, so I don't know whether you might have thought of that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think this is part of the globalization, which is all keeping us on our tooth.
So you would be open to other partners?
And we are always in discussions, and if there is a win-win-win situation, why shouldn't we open discussions like that?
Right.
So I think, obviously, but why didn't that happen? What I hear is then, it needs two strong people at the top to make this happen.
Right.
Chairman at the top to make this happen. It can't be done at the regional level or the country level.
Right.
So I think though, let's say, maybe Bernard Meyer might have met with Rajiv Chhabra at that time and said, yeah, okay, it's fine, but it had to have some meeting at the top. It could happen again, because what's changed right now is that Volkswagen has become dependent a lot on SAIC in China. Now, the news is that cars like the new Audi Q5 might actually be built off an SAIC platform.
Oh, wow.
So Volkswagen is different because, they know how to do it quickly. They know how to do it cost effectively. They have the relevant tech right now, which is basically, all in the software. We are in an electrified age. It's not so analog where Volkswagen is traditionally strong or was traditionally strong. So I think there's a lot of chat over there. It's logical that they should look at something over here. It might get a little complicated with JSW. So these are the things that could happen. But I think still early days. But I think what is absolutely critical is that Volkswagen and Skoda both have to get their mass EV out very, very fast. Cafe 3 is coming along.
Right.
And for Cafe, it's much tougher.
Without an EV.
Yeah, without an EV. You have to have...
And you have some insight there as well.
Yeah, from what I understand is that VW Skoda combined might need to have as high as about 40 to 50,000 EVs by the end of 28. Now, Cafe 3 kicks in April 27, but it's calculated at the end of the year.
Right.
So they would need to have their car out some point and meet that by...
Wow, so it's a race against time.
It's a race against time. So I think they have to decide their EV strategy. One talk is, and I think, some of the officials have alluded to that, is that they will go for the car they're developing for China.
Right.
And that, I think, is a very...
The vehicle architecture.
The vehicle architecture, that's a very well-spec car, and it's likely that's the one that will come here.
Yeah, I mean, what I understand from discussions within the group and also some of the stakeholders that cater to the company, that it could potentially be something like a Creta EV. Could it be a Kushaq EV? But they're not going small. What I understand, it is going to be a sort of a 4.3 meter kind of an EV. So clearly they'll stick to their core of well-engineered.
Yeah, and with the GSC the way it is, I think it makes sense to be above 4 meters.
There's just no value of going for sub 4 meter as long as there's no demand at the entry level.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. You just have to make it really cost effectively, which is going to be the challenge. Ketan, I think one thing that's been crucial to the viability of the operations is exports. They've done it quite well to some extent.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, amongst many global multinational corporations, after Hyundai, probably it was the Skoda Auto Volkswagen or erstwhile Volkswagen India Private Limited that broke into profit. They really sweated their assets well. In fact, for a longer period of time, majority of the cars that were exported from India into Mexico were all VWs. VW Vento was probably amongst the top 2 or 3 selling cars there. So the group has really leveraged India as a base. While a large part of last decade was VW utilizing India as an export base, even with the 2.0 cars, they are being exported around the world. VW does send Taigun back to Mexico, South Africa, and many of the other African markets. And now the biggest, jump you're going to see with Skoda coming in. Skoda actually sees India as the beachhead for their globalization strategy. They are opening up the entire Southeast Asian market with India as a manufacturing base. A lot of these 2.0 cars are going to go into Southeast Asian market. I think they've already signed something with regards to Vietnam. They're going to open up many new markets, Malaysia, Indonesia, eventually. So clearly export, they've leveraged it really well. And even in future, you do expect the cars that are designed for future. I think even the 7th EV from the Skoda brand, it is designed specifically for India and other emerging markets. So export is really going to play a critical role, be it for ICE and even for EVs in the future.
Yeah, we talked about that EV is very crucial. I think clearly we have to see what it is. From what we understand, it is coming from China.
Absolutely. The economies of scale will matter, and India definitely will be that critical hub that will ensure that it serves many global markets, and at the same time, the local operation will also make money out of it. You know what, Hormazd, in the last 20 years, a lot has happened. One thing that I feel the group suffers from, and especially Skoda brand, is the constant churn and management of late. Over the last 18 to 24 months, we've seen 3 different brand directors, 3 different head of sales, 3 different head of marketing. And you've recently interviewed Peter Yaneba. I'd like to get to know your views about him. He's a hard taskmaster, I hear. There's a lot of churn at the dealership right now. With the dwindling volumes, there's an expansion of dealership happening. With really new head of sales, head of marketing, I don't know who's managing those critical roles at this point in time, or Peter Yaneba is batting from the front foot, I don't know. But I think Skoda has been leading the way for the group, and the way the fortunes of Skoda brand is evolving at this point in time is a matter of concern. But you've had good sessions with Peter Yaneba. What's been your assessment?
No, so I think clearly what you're saying is right. I mean, Skoda was leading the brand, even leading by volume. And now Volkswagen has taken over. Again, I think hats off to Volkswagen, though, they've had more stable leadership. All said and done, Ashish Gupta has kind of maintained a steady keel over there. Volumes are, in a way, more consistent than what Skoda are, which have kind of dropped dramatically, largely after, I think Zach left. I think Peter Salt's, in his time, there was a lot of struggle. I mean, his leaving this early, I don't think it's coincidental why it was. But honestly, I think with Peter Yaneba, it's been like he's come on a mission. I think he's quite aware that he's going to take some hard calls. It might be pain in the short term, but I think he wants to clean up the whole system and try and be ready for the subcompact SUV. And I think that is going to be something which will give them a lot more volumes, because though it is in a very competitive segment and coming late, there are certain aspects about the let's say Skodas and Volkswagen in every segment which finds a loyal fan following. So they just have to be realistic on their volumes. But I think that could find, because it's going to have a cracker of an engine. It'll have a 1 liter, which will be, I think, it's a very, very strong engine over there. No, I don't think there's a 1.5 yet, because it would not be get the tax benefit being smaller than 4 meters. But from what I understand, it's spacious, and I think it'll be a pretty exciting vehicle. Won't have the features as yet. In fact, that's where the downside is. But it will have a loyal following. I think both Volkswagen and Skoda have loyal followings. People who want a car that's dynamically brilliant, has good performance, drives well, is very, very safe and solid. And I think that's what they need to play on.
Sub-4 meter from Skoda. What about VW brand?
No, that's interesting. I mean, each brand can decide whether they want a sub-4 meter or not a sub-4 meter. Now, what I hear again is that Volkswagen have been burnt badly by the Amio sub-4 meter. They spent around 70 million euros, I think, on developing it. Again, a crazy cost, especially for a car that looked like a Vento. I just reversed into a wall, and if you got a sub-4 meter, right. A very badly designed car, just a truncated boot. Not much effort gone into it. No extension of wheelbase over there or anything. So, and I think what I hear is that the CFO of Volkswagen brand at that time, right now, was, CFO of the group, perhaps felt that there's no money in sub-4 meters and, was not keen on going the sub-4 meter route for the compact SUV. But what I hear is Volkswagen is desperately fighting for the sub-4 meter. They want it.
What are you saying?
Yeah, it's not off the table yet. So though they might officially say that we want to be premium and we don't want to go down market, go lower into a lower segment.
No, that's interesting, because I think it was at the Munich Mobility Show. Their global CEO, Mr. Schaefer, he mentioned that given the growth of electric vehicles in India, probably you may not really see an internal combustion engine. But I think
I think that's changed. I don't think that's the case. I think there's been a rethink. Actually, that was the plan, because after the Taygun Virtus, there would just be constant facelifts of them, but no plan to replace them, and no subcompact, let's say VW.
Right.
So that was the plan then. But I think that's changed right now. And I think also...
That's all to hear.
Yeah, I think also what is happening is that, let's get one thing right, that despite all the challenges, they are plotting a future over here.
Yeah.
I find on social media, it's very fashionable to say, oh, they're going to exit. Anything happens, they're going to exit. Companies are not going to exit unless they are forced to. Everyone thinks of Ford.
Right.
Ford did not want to exit. It was forced to exit because they were led to a path where the joint venture talks failed and they didn't have enough time to develop a BS6 engine, so they couldn't sell anything in India. They had to pack up.
Right.
No company is just going to pack up. India is too important a market to let go.
Oh, absolutely.
So whether it's Stellantis who's not doing well, Renault, Nissan who are not doing well, they have no plans of exiting the market right now. They will keep giving it a good shot. And I think that's also what Volkswagen and Skoda both trying to do. So, I find these comments on social media very assuming, another company going to exit. It's not going to happen in a hurry. So coming back to this, I think they are planning, let's say, I think you also wrote about it, a next generation of ICE vehicles.
Right, absolutely. Again, some of these nuggets came from the Munich Mobility Show, and Klaus Zellmer and both Mr. Schaefer, they are big fans of India. Mr. Schaefer was earlier in his previous stint as Mercedes-Benz. He knew Indian market very well. He thinks very highly of the Indian market, and all along, both the global CEOs have often mentioned that they would want to leverage the Indian base much more strongly than they have ever done. And in fact, our colleague Prerna was in Prague recently to see the first visuals of the Surfometer. And Klaus Zellmer there clearly mentioned India is the second leg. I mean, if you were to really look at Skoda globally, they're not there in US, which is the second largest market in the world. They've exited China, which is the largest market in the world. Because of the geopolitical crisis in Russia, they've had to exit that country as well.
India is there.
So India then becomes a critical cog in the wheel for their future growth. And it is their beachhead. They've said that often. And I think MQB A037, something that you alluded to, the first gen MQB A037.
That's right.
That could be the potential platform.
Exactly. So it's quite interesting. They came in with the MQB A027, which was
the
second gen, but the latest one with the latest electronic architecture. That's why you are getting the touch screens and the digital dash. But there's so much more you have to do. You need ADAS and stuff like that going forward. MQB 37 was the first gen,
right,
but with an outdated ENE architecture, but for much bigger cars.
Right.
The Octavia and all were on the A037.
Right.
I think now they are contemplating that. I believe discussions have started.
You're right, yeah.
Nothing has signed off. So it will mean a whole development, redeveloping the platform with the latest ENE, the electronic architecture, to support, let's say
the future
technologies fundamentally of ADAS, and all the digital kind of gadgets and gizmos and technology that one will foresee coming in the future. That requires a lot of, ENE firepower, maybe going to Ethernet, and stuff like that, which is, what even Mahindra is doing right now. So
right.
I think that's the next stage. And once you have that, the next generation of Virtus, the next generation of Taygun, Kushaq, Slavia could be bigger and on the 37 platform. And they could even look at a 7-seater option, which I think is just a logical thing to do, to just broaden their, let's say vehicle portfolio, not getting into hatchbacks again. It's just not affordable. The new Polo, people talk about it. It can't come. It's more than 4 meters. And can you imagine the engineering cost of just shaving a few? It just not be viable at all.
So could that open the door for Polo again with MQB A037?
No, impossible. I think, firstly, it's just not a segment you can make money in. And the current Polo is more than 4 meters.
Right.
So just the cost of re-engineering it to be below 4 meters would be so huge, the volumes would not justify.
Right.
So I don't think the Polo is not coming back as a regular hatch or a mass-produced hatch. It might come as a GTI or, in some other CBU form.
Right.
So I think that's what it's, that's...
Now, help me understand on the CBU CKD strategy. It's been rather stop-start. They brought in models, they've discontinued them. It in a way kind of puts the prospective buyer away. What do you think has been the rationale behind introduction and discontinuation?
Yeah, I think it's a question of the volume. and a lot of things actually. Let's talk on CBUs. They have brought in CBUs, but in very, very small volumes, not with much success, because honestly, CBUs, the price just goes through the roof. That's where the duty structure is. And the CBUs fundamentally works with luxury cars and super premium brands or luxury brands. It works for an Audi, it'll work for Porsche, of course, it'll work for Lamborghini. Those cars only come in as CBUs, very small numbers, and people will pay cross and cross for them.
Right.
For Volkswagen and Skoda, they're more, let's say, mass premium brands, good brands, and the brand doesn't have that strength for a high price. Classic case is the current Superb, which they got in 100 units as imports. Price was crazy, around 55 lakhs. Not many takers for that. I think for few have sold, but it was a good experiment in any case to see. But clearly, you can only get them in very small numbers, and it doesn't make sense getting these small, let's say, lots of CBUs. CKD, obviously, a much better way to do it. So Kodiaq is one, product that's going to continue in a good CKD form. I think even a Tiguan in a similar way. But I think, again, there are challenges there. Now, for example, the new Superb, it can't come as a CKD because change of plant. Right. I think you got this officially from, Peter Yanaba that
yes,
because the plant has shifted from Rade Boleslav to Bratislava for the new next-gen Superb. Bratislava doesn't have a CKD facility.
Right.
Now, why can't they set up a CKD facility? Yes, they can, but it will cost a lot of money.
Correct.
And that cost does not justify this lot of volumes, which will be maybe, a couple of thousand units a month.
Right.
So it's really this coming back to the fundamental problem is the cost versus volumes, issue. These sort of costs, the high engineering costs, which are crazy. I talked about calibration. They're so ridiculously expensive. If there was a possibility of Volkswagen HQ just somehow taking that one-time cost, it would just make the India operations viable. But it's not possible for multiple reasons. That would have been so much easier. But it's this one-time cost which sometimes becomes a big hurdle.
Talking about CBU, CKD, Hormazd, there's a lot of excitement there. What is it that, what is the sense you're getting?
Well, I think, I think clearly a lot happening on the, let's say, CKD front, obviously, or let's say even the CBU front. I think there's, from the EV side, there's the Enyaq, which is a long time coming. Then now there's talk of the L-Rock, which will be a more affordable EV. That's also exciting. I think the new Kodiaq is expected
next year.
Yeah. Octavia VRS, I think enthusiasts would love that. That could come back. I think PT Anaba talks even about bringing diesel back. So he's very excited and he's very open to bring these products. I don't know what sort of a market there would be for that. I think Superb also coming back, but again, sadly, only as a CBU.
What about VW brands? Any updates there you expect?
I think VW brand also, clearly you got the Tayron, which is coming. That's the 7-seater version. I think that will be really the Skoda rival, Skoda Kodiaq rival. So that's much bigger, 7-seater. So that is a big one for them from the CKD portfolio. ID for long time coming. I don't know. I think dealers say it's going to be some crazy price, 55, 60 lakhs. Doesn't make sense at that price. And hopefully they will bring some hot versions of the Polo, which really is very much, something which is very core to their brand in terms of performance. Very small volumes, but it does a lot.
Now, good to know so many cars coming, and they're committed to the Indian market and bringing in more cars for the Indian buyers.
Yeah.
There was a comment made by Klaus Zellmer recently to Indian media in Prague about how cars, over-engineered cars are not desirable. And probably he was alluding to that.
Well, I think, he made that statement as a general statement, but I don't think the India 2.0 cars are over-engineered. In fact, I think Volkswagen has turned a blind eye to a lot of things over there. Certain, let's say even you look at the roofliner, not of great quality compared to, let's say, some of the importing. That's all fine. I think they've been very well-engineered. They've been highly localized. But there are aspects of, let's say, I wouldn't say over-engineering, but where you don't want to compromise the brand for a certain things. And there are two examples which I want to share on the MQB platform, which is localized here, and two things which haven't been done. Now, the radiator fan has a brushless motor,
right?
Which Volkswagen doesn't want to, let's say, lower the standard of that. Now, that was not easy to localize. It hasn't been localized, so that's important. So that's a cost over there. But I think what's interesting, and one of the reasons why the cars handle so well is the rear suspension. Now, that's imported. Quite an expensive component to import, because that part is a proprietary technology, from what I understand, of their supplier Bentler. It's just got various thickness sections, and, it twists and torsions in a certain way. So that obviously they will import from them, because I think, to localize that again is a challenge. And just the other day, or a month back, I was driving the Kushaq down from Mahabaleshwar. And I mean, I would buy that car, honestly. I just loved it for what it is, the way it drives. Handling was outstanding. The DSG worked brilliantly. But, that's in a very specific situation. For day-to-day driving, I think it's things like, low-speed ride, all the features, the entertainment, all that, which is more important. So I think that's where, I think perhaps Skoda, Volkswagen, they're very specific to a certain kind of user base, a certain kind of, I would say, enthusiast base, but they don't address the mass segments as well as the Korean and...
So probably what he might have meant was right engineered products for the value and the price an Indian consumer is willing to pay. Probably that's what he might have meant by over-engineered, I believe.
Yeah, I think he would have mentioned that, but these are two classic examples of it. And, again, over there, it's going back to, I think, the rigidity of Volkswagen, wanting to kind of make not, let's say, being flexible at all. We talked about how they charge for small little components like puzzle lamps or a remote start, that sort of thing. But I think overall, I think we've talked a lot about it. Yes, they do have challenges. They are looking for a partner. Which partner remains to be seen. There are talks with Mahindra for sure. I'm speculating that SAIC could be a logical partner as well. And, honestly, SAIC makes a lot of sense because, they've got the future tech, which is electrification. And
may not be equity, but more of a platform sharing.
That's right. And, from Mahindra's point of view, what they want from Volkswagen, they don't really have. They want hybrids, but Volkswagen only wants plug-in hybrids. They don't have, let's say, a series hybrid, for example. So I think the match between Mahindra and Volkswagen isn't quite there.
Right.
But obviously Mahindra wants the capacity. So that's one thing they would look at. But I think overall, they have to take some strong decisions, which I think they will. And I think, they're obviously cars are going to be, I think that what I'm looking forward to is the small compact SUV from Skoda. I think it's got a fair amount of promise, despite being in a very competitive segment and coming late to the market. Just, I think, by the sheer way it will drive.
I mean, to be honest, Hormazd, what I'm clearly excited about are the new gen platforms. The discussion has been going on, and what I understand is that at least within the ecosystem, there's that speed and agility. Something that we spoke of, how it takes a long period of time for them to manage their life cycle as well, which has been one of their biggest problems. So I'm looking forward to MQB A037. Probably that will give us the future cars, the new gen,
that's right,
the new gen products, and probably a wider portfolio from the group. I'm excited to hear about the fact that we probably get a 2.5 version of Volkswagen brand, which means
that's not confirmed, but I think they're fighting for it.
It's good to hear that.
Yeah,
good to hear that.
I mean, fighting for it. Maybe they might get it, but I think there's got to be, and I hope they get it because it is absurd that because Amio didn't do well, this you just assume this will not do well, or that's
but clearly
that is the logic.
But clearly, ICE has a longer run in the.
That's
future.
Also what has changed their perspective, and I think they're strong in ICE. So I think that also gives them an encouragement to now go in for an additional platform because MQB the 27 is done right now. I think they've maxed it out.
Right.
So I think the next products will be on this. But there's such a gap. So they'll have to be doing a lot of facelifts and refreshes. I don't know how many they'll do to be competitive. I mean, already these cars are on discounts right now. Right. So, and they're not that much into their life cycle. So they will have to keep updating them, refreshing them. But clearly, there is a future. And I think, I think at the end of the day, both have certain core engineering attributes that a certain category of buyer enjoys.
But one concern I have for the group with dwindling volumes and expanding dealership, I think how do you get the channel partners to be profitable is going to be a critical aspect. If your the first port of contact for you, which is your consumer, is your dealer. If the dealer is not happy, at the end of the day, your consumer is going to be facing the brunt. And we've seen quite often in the past that when dealers lose money, they kind of fleece customers. And we've seen it with many brands in the past. This knack of wanting to expand footprint in order to get larger volumes, and the current initiative by many brands, we've heard it across brands that, there are more dealerships being put up and market right now is slowing down. The stocks are moving up. I understand that more than half of Skoda dealers are right now losing money. In a falling volume market, and especially for the brand, when you expand the footprint, I think hopefully Peter will be able to put in right systems and processes.
Yeah, I think, I'll be honest, I met him a couple of times and it's just my instinct. I think, he's got the right ideas. I think he's going to clean up the system a lot. I think there will be pain for the dealers. Maybe, the OEM, the brands will have to give some sort of support, to keep things going. Because it's going to be a tough couple of years with no product coming. It's going to be barren, just a small. I mean, even the EVs, they've still not come. Whether it's the ENIAC or the
L-Rock.
Now the L-Rock is coming. They're talking about that, which is, again, the news we broke. But from Volkswagen's point of view, the ID4 keeps coming. In fact, I tweeted about that ridiculous brand, let's say, day they did where they showed the ID4 for the third time sometime and just had some variants and nothing new to speak of. I think it's better not to have that and, do things, which are, spend that money in kind of doing things, at the showroom level for customers and, kind of spending that money more judicially.
The other factor I want to touch upon is the entire perception of high cost of service and high cost of maintenance for both the brands. I mean, Skoda, especially Skoda, the brand was known for amazing quality of vehicle and drive, but when it came to cost of service and cost of maintenance, there was always a strong baggage.
And there were the DSG issues also.
Absolutely.
Mechatronic issues.
Absolutely. And then with so many CKD and CBU vehicles, availability of parts was always a challenge. I'm not really sure whether, a Skoda or a Volkswagen, are they really being accountable to their, buyers there when it comes to service?
Yeah, well, I think service has definitely been a big issue for both these brands and for multiple reasons. One is, the fill rate of the parts. And I think, let's say, I think a lot has improved, honestly, with 2.0 because so many of the parts are localized, unlike before where a lot of the parts were not localized. So that really, getting, cars stranded in for service for a long time or some replacement part, which, they haven't been able to source was an issue. But I think slightly better right now, but clearly, a long way to go. They don't have anywhere close to the service or reliability reputation of, let's say, a Maruti or even the Korean manufacturers. I think that's really something they need to work.
Now, I'm just looking forward to the suffometer, like you mentioned, and hopefully they can get the product packaging, product positioning, pricing right. I think now with the expanded dealership, they have hopefully the right network in place, and with the correction that Peter would do, hopefully they have the right foundation now, and really looking forward to the future products from the group.
Yes, well, it's an exciting future for the auto industry. Volkswagen, Skoda totally, got their dug into this market. They have to make it work. Well, I think that's a lot of info I think we've given you on this edition of Deep Drive. Thanks for tuning in, and do come back next Saturday, same time.